there is a concerted effort to keep the public from having access to awareness about not just UFOs and UAPs, but the reality of life. I have been told that the Vatican has direct information regarding this phenomenon that they have been sitting on, and they will not come forward unless there is enough cover to do so. I think there is enough evidence that willing and curious citizens and citizen scientists, citizen researchers can get in the game and help figure this out, and also parameterize what the phenomenon is and likely is not.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Watch Mojo's Unveiled podcast. I'm your host, Rob, and before we dive into today's episode, I just want to let you all know that the Unveiled podcast is now available on all podcast platforms. So if you listen on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever else, please follow the Unveiled podcast. It really helps us out and supports the show. So with that out of the way, I'd like to introduce today's guest. Joining us again is Reed Summers. Welcome back, Reed.
Thank you, Rob. Good to be here.
It's great to speak with you again. You were, in fact, the very first person that I interviewed on Unveiled. And I have to actually thank you because you connected me to several people who became great podcast guests and who introduced me to others and started to build and grow my network. So that was really a really big thing for me. And it really helped to kind of springboard the show to where it is now. So thank you so much. And to all the listeners out there, I implore you, please stop what you're doing right now. Head over to YouTube, go check out Emergent, which is the name of Reed's podcast. The link for that will be in the description of this episode. Subscribe, watch his stuff. You won't regret it. I've never come across such a treasure trove of information about UAP and NHI and everything else surrounding this topic. He's got great guests. The discussions are thorough and detailed. So please go check that out. He deserves more, a larger audience, and more listeners need to hear what Reed has to say. So with that out of the way, let's jump into the content of today's episode. I'd like to talk to you about NHI because you are what I consider to be an expert on the subject of non-human intelligence with regard to UAP. So something we didn't get a chance to touch on in our first conversation was how you got into this field in the first place. Could you take us back to what got you interested in all this?
Yeah, sure. Well, in my case, the phenomenon found me versus me finding it. And my family has been involved in this topic for almost 45 years, going back to way before I was born. And so I grew up in the context of considering non-human forms of life, not just in the universe, but in visitation to our world, and all of the ancillary phenomena associated with NHI and NHI-initiated contact and engagement, whether that was telepathic or psionic engagement, whether that was physical close approach between UAP and ground observers, or physical approach in the intimate spaces in terms of physical contact and even abductions. So I've been considering this for a long period of time. I've been professionally involved more in the last couple of years since the hearings in Congress in 2023 and all of the events to follow kind of brought me back in. I've been looking at this so long and so hard for such a period of time that I've even tried to not look at it. It's been challenging to stay up at the forefront of this topic, given all of the ridicule and derision and doubt that comes with it. And yet I think now society is coming to acknowledge that there are phenomena in our skies, in our oceans, that we cannot account for, and that they may have a non-human origin. And we have to figure out what that means and what this presence is and what it's doing. So I think people are ready. There's a need to know. I don't even have to tell people they need to know. They already know it. Like, I think there's an instinctual need to understand your environment, the context in which your life is happening, and in which your future will unfold. And so I think our engagement with non-human life and intelligence, whatever that ends up meaning, is going to play a part in reshaping our world and our sense of self in the universe, and everything that has to do with human society at all levels: religion, economics, politics, everything. So it's a huge consideration, and I'm excited to see more people drawn into this because I think this is one of the great events of our time. If real, if we are being visited or engaged by non-human intelligences, this is monumental. Could be one of the greatest events in history. So that's why I'm involved in the near term. But going back in time, yeah, I have been just privy to all aspects of this phenomenon, in terms of also its more challenging aspects, its more strange, bizarre, paranormal aspects. My family has had communication experiences with non-human intelligence. That's a part of my story and journey. So I've seen many different angles of this, and I'm just excited to help the broad public find their way into this topic, to think through its enigmatic aspects, and to stay grounded and logical as they do so.
Do you mind sharing with us that story of your family's contact experience?
Yeah, well, my father, Marshall Vion Summers, is a highly gifted telepathic individual in terms of the ability to receive communication, and to engage in bidirectional communication over a long period of time. And he cultivated that as a spiritual teacher in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And then in the late 90s, something very shocking and unexpected happened in his life. He was contacted by a group of entities that claimed to be observing humanity, physical, non human intelligences in the vicinity of the Earth, and seeking to impart a set of communiques to advise humanity on the nature of its evolutionary trajectory, as well as its present, past, and future contact with other forms of intelligent life. So he, over after some difficult period of time processing this, relented and received those communications, which are available up online for people to read. And they were eye-opening. They did provide something of a ground, a context upon which for me to consider this as fundamentally real, because those communications, most importantly, what they did is they corroborated what we human beings can observe on the ground about the phenomenon. So they are highly in tune with the 80-year record of evidence related to UFO UAP activity and the testimonial record of encounters with non-human intelligence. So the two square up extremely well. And so it was a corroborating source for myself, and it kicked off my curiosity and the real and present need to know and to understand, what is this non-human presence? What is it actually doing? What is it a part of beyond our world? What is the We have an ecosystem on Earth, ecosystem of different interacting, collaborating, competing life forms. Might we live in an exosystem, an exo reality of exopolitical engagements, exoeconomic engagements? And so it spurred my interest and need to understand, or at least to analyze the possibilities regarding what that exosystemic reality would be. So it's been a long journey with the phenomenon. It's not been easy. It's actually been quite difficult. There is definitely an approach aversion for those who have been intimately touched by this reality, not necessarily what they wanted to have happen. It's not they didn't pursue it; it came and found them. So it's challenging to hold this as a human being in a world that does not acknowledge anything beyond the island shores of our human home out in the blue, the deep black of the ocean of space around us. So, we live in a society that thinks it is truly alone and exceptional and at the center of this reality of life in the universe. And I don't think that's the case. So, kudos to others who have also walked that challenging journey of holding that in their awareness. And also kudos to those who have found a way to contribute to broadening human awareness of the reality of non-human intelligence.
How has your father's experiences shaped the way in which you approach this topic in terms of your research or the messages that you want to put out there and share with people?
Yeah, well, my family has cultivated an understanding that human sovereignty at an individual and collective level is paramount. Autonomy is key in all relational engagements, and we have a set of full human capabilities intellectually, but also instinctually, and in addition spiritually, that we could bring to bear to perceive reality itself, whether that's earth-based reality or non-earth-based reality. And so there is a fuller set of human capabilities, which I've been working on developing in myself. And some of them are spiritual in nature. Some of them do allow instantaneous perception of objective reality, something of a Gnostic perceptive ability. This has been practiced, since time immemorial on Earth in many traditions, and also a divine connection that can provide a sense of both grounding in the world, that says you're not just who you look like, you're not your body, or what you think like, you're not your mind. You are a greater entity on a journey of sorts in this physical universe. And I think that grounding allows one to consider, okay, well, maybe I am part of a physical universe, not just an earth-based reality and earth-based traditions. And so you begin to cast your attention outward to consider, well, what is the actual environment in which this soul is undertaking its journey? And it's not necessarily only human. And so all of that combines for me to create a very grounded, um, logical approach using our human intellect, our human history and knowledge base, what we know about nature and species interaction. That's very important, I know, for Marshall and myself, a nature based and nature informed view of the universe and of contact with that universe, but also one in which we might find a sense of calling to contribute. Might this be one of the great issues of our time that we're here to contribute to, and yet no one knows about it? They don't know it's happening, right? And so it's like I feel at times like my generation and the ones slightly older than mine, maybe slightly younger, have been thirsting for some sense of a calling, a cause, something to contribute to that has vitality and energy to it. And we look out on the human playing field, right? And it's the same old, same old. Political divisions, social, religious. We live in an attention economy. Everyone's living in the algorithm river, right? Just doom scrolling to the next video that contains nothing but empty carbs for the mind. And people are thirsting for, like, why am I here? What can I be a part of? How can I help move the species forward? I think that's a natural inclination in any species, which is to contribute to the continuance, right, to the next generation. And so, in a sense, we're obstructed from what could be a natural awareness of where our human species is going to go, which is from tribe to nation, nation to world community to something of an engagement with other forms, other communities, other species out there in the true ecosystem in which we live. And yet there's this giant, cement wall that's been erected between the public and access to awareness of that reality. And thus, with awareness comes education, action, contribution. And so that concrete wall was erected by very specific actors. I would say both human and non-human. There is a concerted effort to keep the public from having access to awareness about not just UFOs and UAPs, but the reality of life. And so that needs to be, pulverized, right? We need to break down that proto or that archetypal Berlin Wall that separates humanity from whatever lies beyond, because that's what's going to activate the gifts that that they carry and can contribute to really awakening in humanity, whatever it has as a species and as a collective, that it could contribute into that larger framework of life.
Can you be more specific about the actors that you mentioned who have erected this wall, human and non-human? Who do you think is behind it? What do you think the motivation is?
Yeah, and I think that's what we'll get into is some of the history of the phenomenon, the history of NHI, non-human intelligence, that concept, and some of the historic activity of alleged non-human activities, interactions, engagements. But I would say that what we're encountering is a distinct 20th century contact event. Events occurred in the 20th century on the human side that triggered what might be observation, leading to engagement, leading to latter phases of a programmatic um, interaction and incursion into our world by non-human intelligences. So, those activities include global conflict on a scale never seen before, rapid technological development, overpopulation, environmental deterioration, the use of nuclear weapons, and the development of nuclear energy. So these are unique 20th century events, right? Never before in human history, in the 300,000 years of our species evolution, have we seen events like this. And I would say not for many hundreds of thousands of years has Earth been pressured and degraded in ways that it is now. So I think that what that did is it put off a telltale bio and technological signature into the universe. It triggered the arrival of certain observing entities, and we are somewhere in the middle of this programmatic engagement with humanity. So I think that became known by certain federal authorities, not just in the United States, but also in the USSR, in what would become the Chinese Communist People's Republic, and in other middle-sized emerging countries. I think of the BRICS here: Brazil, Russia, India, China as well. They became aware that this presence was here. I think there's a strong likelihood that they have recovered craft that have either crashed or been deposited that are of non-human origin, that they have been engaged in a reverse engineering program to try to gain either technological parity with the phenomenon, to weaponize these discoveries and gain predominance among competitors, here on Earth. And there are a lot of vested interests among human beings regarding access to that technology, to the scientific knowledge behind it. Crimes have been committed, people have been harmed, people have likely been killed to keep this secret. This phenomenon has birthed a deep state, black budget reality, not just again in the West, but also in other countries that have, I would say, distorted society. They have distorted the citizen government compact. We pay our taxes so that the government provides and credibly guards our interests as a human species. I don't think that's taken place with this phenomenon. I also think the phenomenon has exited government and gone into the private sphere, and so there are companies that are privatizing this knowledge, that are guarding its secrets from the public, and the government is at least complicit, if not a collaborator in that. And so it's a very messy, convoluted picture on the human side. But on the non-human side, we have a phenomenon that is chosen to take a track of strategic ambiguity, tactical secrecy. It has operated in a state of non-disclosure. It could have disclosed itself. It could make itself known at any point credibly to the global public. It has not chosen to do that. There are indications and strong testimonial signals that people have been engaged physically, non-consensually, in ways that do violate their legal rights as citizens of a state, but also their basic autonomy and access to free will. And so I think that is a reality as well. I don't doubt at this point that non-human intelligence has made overtures to power centers, governments, militaries, private company, possibly even religious leaders to try and gain either access, influence, and overall to undertake whatever this programmatic engagement is and what it's for. And that's the real question: is what is it for? Like, what is the intent of the phenomenon? What is its end game? That's not something we can fully know right now, but there are strong indicators in the historical record that should cause us to focus our attention and go figure out, what are those most intimate points of human contact that might tell us what the overall project is.
Yeah, and we will definitely get into that. But I'd like to follow up on your point of the non-human intelligence not overtly making themselves known to the to the public, in hand with governments compartmentalizing and making a big secret out of everything. Is there any chance, do you think, that these two interests are aligned because there is a greater reason why the public shouldn't know about the NHI presence on a grand scale?
I think there are a number of reasons why it has been decided that the public should not know. Some are completely unjustified. Some relate to, again, personal liability, personal profitability, power, prestige, etc. And some relate to the more difficult aspects of the phenomenon that, frankly, it is difficult to tell the public about, especially when they have been kept in the dark for so long, and when such a misinformation as well as disinformation campaign has been engineered against the population at large. So it is truly between a rock and a hard place in that sense. I would say at this point, given the history of the phenomenon, its core data, and the indicators and signs that it is giving us, both in what it is doing, but also in what it is not doing, that it is clear that NHI is not in a remote observing position. This is not an incidental science experiment. This is not a flyby. This is a direct incursion into the human world. NHI is taking up a position. There is, I think, signals that there is an active interest in at least shaping or adjusting or directing, if not fully directing, the course that human society takes, specifically technologically, but also the distribution of power in the world, the balance of power between major economies and major nation states, as well as, and I would say most clearly, the way the human population perceives NHI itself. I think there is a concerted effort to spread certain memes certain belief systems regarding non-human entities and why they would be here, as well as belief systems about humanity, human history, human origins, and human value that are an attempt to do a kind of social engineering to shape the thought space, the information space prior to physical, open, direct engagement at a global scale. I think that is a possibility we need to strongly consider. So, but to answer your question, yes, I think it is possible that there is a collaboration at play between certain human actors and certain non human actors. It would make sense if they have been operating in the world at scale in terms of the tens of thousands of credible sightings reported, estimated to be reported every year. This is a panoramic phenomenon. It is global, it is in the oceans, in the skies. And so, why wouldn't they reach out? Why wouldn't there be a human partner that would want to work with in order to gain access to powerful exotechnologies that could revolutionize everything from the energy grid to military offense, defense to human presence in space? So, it's time to begin talking not just about NHI as a reality or NHI as a presence, but NHI as an interest. What is their interest? What stake are they taking? And is there a quiet subterranean effort to shift humanity's direction in subtle or more overt ways?
Right. So let's talk about what some of the possibilities are in terms of the NHI interest. And maybe we should start by defining what we mean when we're talking about NHI.
Right.
Is it physical beings that we're speaking about mostly? Is there a paranormal component to this? Like, what is your understanding of when we speak broadly about NHI? What are we talking about?
Well, the phrase or the word non-human goes back to the 1950s and has been used in a number of congressional settings. It's been used by academics and researchers for some time, and it was formally inserted into the language of government in 2023 with the passage of the UAP Disclosure Act, which was signed into Congress by President Joe Biden. And I'll read to you for the first time the exact legal language of what non-human intelligence means. Non-human intelligence means any sentient, intelligent, non-human life form, regardless of nature or origin. And again, that is the first formal definition ever used in a legal setting within our government. So this word came into full focus during the 2023 hearings with Ryan Graves, David Frazier, and David Grush, all highly credible people with firsthand or secondhand experience of what was described as non-human forms of technology. There were claims made of reverse engineering programs, and also claims of biologics. So we could take the intelligence word out for a minute and just look at the word non-humans. We're literally talking about non-humans, entities, animated beings, whether they are in the physical plane or a theoretical dimensional space, who have a mind. Presumably, if we're talking biologics, which was the word used by David Grush, we're talking about bodies. And if we're talking about bodies, we're talking about evolved bodies, bodies with fingers, digits, hands, faces, etc., which to my mind suggest an evolutionary process at play. These entities, or at least some of, have arisen in planetary environments. They may have further evolved in interstellar environments, non-planetary based settings. And that may be part of what we're dealing with. I think the word non-human intelligence was selected to open up the aperture to allow the public to entertain the possibility without having to confront the word aliens and all the derisive pejoratives created like little green men, right, to confuse the public and to discourage people from looking at this. And also, people globally already believe in non-human intelligence, whether that's, non-corporeal spiritual entities, ghosts, etheric presences, spirits, fairies, etc. Right. So like human culture has adopted NHI already and has for thousands of years. So it's an open door in. I think there is a risk of two things. One is becoming decoupled from the relationship between NHI and the UFO phenomenon. The UFO phenomenon presents us with a hard physical reality. These are structured craft detected on radar in the air, observed with the human eye, and many other sensor platforms. And they are structured in the sense that they appear to be shaped and crafted by non-human by a non-human source for the purpose of flight, transmedium travel from air to water, and they have been observed interacting technologically and interfering technologically with human craft for many decades. So we have a hard physical phenomenon that, by all accounts and by all indications, is intelligently controlled. Increasingly clear that it's not us controlling it, at least not entirely. That's not to rule out that there aren't black budget programs or secret weapons platforms up in the air, in the water, in space that could be human, human controlled, human run. But there's no explanation as to how humanity could have developed these technologies on any coherent pathway, step by step pathway. There is the insertion into our space of some phenomenal form of technology with flight characteristics, performance capabilities beyond anything we know of, capable of loitering for days or even weeks in the air, capable of traveling at speeds that are estimated between 40,000, maybe even up to 70,000 miles per hour, capable of accelerations in thousands of G forces. I mean, a modern human craft, from what I understand, the human body can withstand possibly up to 9 G forces. And there are craft in the military arsenals of the major superpowers capable of maybe up to 12, 13, 14 G forces. We're talking thousands of G forces. We're talking craft observed under the ocean by submarine commanders the size of football fields, going hundreds of knots. The fastest speed of a submarine is 40, 50 knots, something in that speed range. So we're talking, there's no way that this could be of human origin. Could it be derived from a non-human source and controlled presently by by human superpowers? That is plausible, and I think that actually might be at play. But the origin of these structured craft do suggest a non-human source.
So there is also a non-physical component to this, because many reports of UFOs describe things like orbs or other non-physical phenomena as well. I know, for example, the organization Skywatcher, headed by Jake Barber, has been observing all kinds of UAP activity, some of them appearing like creatures in the sky more than, physical craft. So what does that tell us about that other side of the phenomenon?
Right. And sorry, I got off question there. Yes. So NHI can certainly encompass a broad category of intelligences that are non-human. I think there's a risk of overcategorization or category inflation. We need to focus in on the phenomenon. What is it telling us? Back to some of the more paranormal or non-physical seeming capabilities of the phenomenon. Well, there are indications that these craft are able to manipulate space-time and to create, whether it's electromagnetic effects, certainly visual effects, or even visual disappearance or cloaking effects that might be a capability of a physical entity with a physical craft, but they may be bridging space-time. There may be some kind of dimensional travel or traversing. I don't doubt that there is also a psi layer to reality itself, but also one in which whatever these entities are, they have been able to tap into that. We are already finding ourselves capable of extrasensory perception and what might be a vestigial capability lost in modern society, but very active in traditional societies. So imagine a species 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 years more advanced. What could they develop at a psi level? Could they develop technologies to engage with that psychological or mental environment of life? And so I think a lot of folks might say, well, this is a sign of interdimensionality, or these are spiritual entities. They're not actually physical. They're dimensional, manifesting physically. I can't say we can rule that out, but what we can rule in is the physicality of the phenomenon. These craft have had major biological effects on people. People have been harmed and killed in these interactions, right? So this is exerting physical force upon us. I think it's logical to think that this is operating in our dimension and that there are technologies that we're not aware of and baseline science that allows physical beings to interact either dimensionally or to warp space-time and create very bizarre effects. And so that might be some of what we're observing here.
Right. So you mentioned that some people have suffered physical consequences with interactions with these craft. I'd like to talk a little bit about what we can discern about the intent. What kind of evidence do we have about NHI intent? And maybe that is too general of a question, because we might not be dealing with one type. There may be various types with different intentions. but and we will get there. But
Right.
just to start us off, what is the most compelling evidence to you that gives us a clue about what the intention might be?
Sure. And I think it's helpful here to start kind of at the beginning. UAP are real, right? We know this now. The 2021 Office of the Director of National Intelligence report concluded that UAP are real. A 2023 panel by NASA experts concluded UAP are real. We are observing real physical anomalies in our environment. So, what are they? Where are they from? Are they human controlled or not? Those are the questions that would then flow from that. A number of anomalous characteristics have been associated with the phenomenon by researchers. Everything from interactive and radical flight to loitering, but also to close approach to observers on the ground and occupants being observed, occupants that are of non-human shape and morphology. So we have real signals that UAP are real. We have real signals that they are structured craft capable of phenomenal flight characteristics and underwater characteristics. We have indications that they are making close approach to human beings. And then there is a massive testimonial record suggesting that these NHI are initiating physical contact with individuals. So all of that to me is like the baseline premise, right? Is that solid enough to stand on? That UAP are real, intelligently controlled, and are undertaking some kind of engagement. In my opinion, it is. We can look at what that intelligent control and what the behavioral patterns suggest. So there is a long-standing record of airspace evasion, anticipation, UAP anticipating the activities of human craft, sending friend-foe signals on coded or classified channels, right? So the ability to interpret our signal transmission and to rebroadcast that potentially deceptively, right? And so are we viewing false flag comes from a naval setting where a craft that doesn't want to be seen for its true origin puts up a false flag. Oh, I'm not you. I'm not them. I'm you. Right. So that's where that comes from. Are we observing activities that suggest an ability or an intention to mimic us, to evade us, to cloak and become not observable, or to confuse or deceive? I think there's strong indications of that in the record. I would also say that the phenomenon, we should look at its presence. It is a truly global phenomenon that has blanketed the world in almost every country for decades and decades. And we could really analyze the spatial, temporal, and circumstantial aspects of what that looks like over time. Has the phenomenon changed? Where it appears, how it appears, to whom it appears? Um, the temporal, that's the temporal, the spatial, the geographic, right? Which countries, which locales, which coastlines, which cities, and then the circumstantial. How have UAP activity tracked on top of major conflicts, major technological developments, major social developments? So there are signs and signals there that to me suggest that, again, there is an effort to entrench in the world. I wouldn't be surprised if the physical location of that entrenchment is in the world's oceans, right? Our human home has a basement to which we have no access and never have. And yet they do. Anything could be going on down there. We would not know. We are also in geostationary lock with our moon. We cannot see the dark side of our moon largely. So anything could be happening there, not to mention all of the orbiting bodies orbiting all the planets of our solar system, right? There's a lot of places to hide in this solar system in which humanity finds itself for now, the apex species. So, and then, this long-term strategic ambiguity. There seems to be an intention to show themselves at certain times, to make mass displays, lights in the sky, and at other times to cloak themselves and to be unseen. And I think there's a lot of concerning indications there that we need to pay attention to. And if we get into the testimonial record, we get into it's less factually established. There's not so much hard evidence in that space, but there are numerous indicators in the testimonial record regarding what the intentions might be.
What are some of the most interesting testimonials to you with regard to the UAP, NHI intentions?
Yeah, I think some of the on the ground close approaches are pretty interesting. I think of the Val Johnson encounter, a sheriff on a rural road in the late 60s, 70s, I want to say, saw a light in the sky. The light rapidly approached his police vehicle, and caused this swath of damage across the vehicle, caused physical harm to him, a missing time experience. And there's a lot of physical evidence associated with this. I believe the vehicle is in a museum today, right? And so um, there is physical evidence there of direct encounter on the ground. I think the aerial school case from Rura, Zimbabwe is another fascinating one where a school of children was on break. The children were outside playing and observed a flash in the sky, a loud sound, a boom, and a craft suddenly appear in the forest at the edge of the schoolyard with two entities, some of whom, according to the children who corroborated each other's accounts pretty amazingly, discussed a telepathic engagement and these entities, beckoning the children to come closer. I think that's fascinating. I think the B-52 incident in Laos toward the end of the Vietnam War, man, that's an eye opener. And I've talked to Bill English. Bill English is the sole surviving member of a Green Beret team sent in to recover whatever they could from a crashed B-52 that had an altercation in the air, alleged altercation with a UAP, according to Grudge Report 13. They found that B-52, and on board was the whole crew strapped into their seats. Nothing. The plane had not crashed. It had been placed down on the forest floor. There was no damage to the plane. It was as if it had literally just been deposited into the middle of the Laotian jungle. Right? What is that? And on board, the crew had been, for want of a better word, mutilated. The ears were excised, reproductive organs were taken out with laser precision. There was very little, if not no blood. Shocking, right? And this team was sent in to recover the dog tags and to destroy the craft. They placed charges on the vehicle and destroyed the evidence of this. And couldn't. I think you can imagine why they might have been told to do so. And then, of course, they were all told to swear an oath of secrecy, etc. So, if NHI are engaging people on the ground in these ways, either via in their vehicle, in person, like in the aerial school case, or more than engagement, are actually potentially doing harm to service people or others, I think that's a major concern. There could be there's what we can see about the phenomenon and what we can't. It's like the iceberg analogy, right? So up on the surface, we see the UAP activity, we hear allegations by former government employees or military personnel, and we hear hearsay of government agreements with NHI, of potential reverse engineering projects and programs, but in collaboration, right, with NHI. I think based on the bulk nature of what the phenomenon is and has been demonstrated to be, there is something under the surface of the water that we can't see. There is some unseen operation at play. We don't know how many people have been engaged. We don't know how many people have been taken, and of those, we don't know how many have been returned. David Paulides, Missing 411, has done a lot of work looking at the disappearance of people in remote national forest, national parkland. And there are almost half a million Americans missing at this moment based on national registries. So are any of those missing due to physical contact with NHI? It could be a small percent, it could be a larger percent, we don't know. But based on the presence and the activity and the shape and direction of the overall program of how they've involved themselves in the world, I think we need to begin asking those questions very seriously.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I've often thought about the importance of talking to experiencers because I've spoken with several on this show. I've also spoken with officials from government settings and military backgrounds and such, and both have their own sets of pros and cons. The military background individuals or people from government, people tend to believe what they say because they have the official status and the access to the information, but at the same time there's a sense that they hold back. They
Mhm.
don't let everything out. And then when you're speaking to experiencers, they really don't hold anything back. They're pretty much open books, but then you question the reliability of the information, and they're often very
Right.
personal experiences. So there's always a grain of salt to be taken with that. What do you think is the key in sharing these stories to a broader audience to get people more interested and start taking this seriously?
Well, I think we need to invite people to come forward and to not be ridiculed for their account, no matter what their account is. I think we do need a concerted, either citizen led or academic led research initiative to collect as much data about the characteristic profile of the encounter with NHI and the reported entities to understand what are people reporting en masse? What are the characteristics of the encounter? And then we need to be able to curate that and basically verify or vet certain accounts and rule out mental illness, substance use, etc., conflation, tendency to conflate. Because of course that's going to all be at play, right? It's like any research project, right? You basically distill down to the most rock solid data set, and then you analyze that for indicators. And then once you have indicators, you go out into the field and do present time research into what the encounter is by those who say they're having it. Now, not all abductees recall their events via hypnosis, as is often said. And that's why a lot of people say they throw it away as unreliable. A lot have waking memory of being physically taken from their intimate spaces and having things, whether it's medical procedures or reproductive interventions, conducted upon them. We should be taking that seriously as a society. Why would we not? There was a time when sexual abuse or sexual assault was was seen as a conflation of mind by the victim, right? It was seen as something either of a weakness. It was, there was a lot of victim shaming and gaslighting of those who reported it. And then society finally came around, due to the courageous efforts of some, to take it seriously and to go figure out what was really taking place in that human on human phenomenon. We need to do the same with NHI initiated contact. So I think that would be a major step. Um, I think, to do something of a longitudinal study of those who meet those vetted characteristics most stringently, and to look at them over time, to collect, to begin to analyze medical information, blood tests, body scans, MRI, right? Why not do that for those who are willing? Because of course that's quite invasive, right? They'd have to be a willing participant in that study. But I know they're out there. There are people who want to take one for the team here and help humanity understand the nature of what's happening. And I think fundamentally we need to rule in or rule out, are abductions happening or not, right? We have to take it out of hearsay and out of the pure testimonial record and bring it into the the other sides of the evidential record. So gaining physical evidence, demonstrative evidence, not just testimonial evidence. So I think that's the project at hand, but it would only be done if we were taking this seriously enough. And that's what I want to impress upon people is, be careful what you see in the social space, the social media space. Step out of your algorithm, right? Follow credible sources, think logically, cautiously, and responsibly, and go analyze the history of the phenomenon. The records are there, the signs are there. There's enough body of evidential record to say there is definitely a there. And as a society, we need to go figure out what's behind this thing, this presence, this activity.
Right. You mentioned finding credible sources, and that can be challenging to some degree. Who do you think are the most credible voices, or some of the most credible voices within this space that people can look to for, good research sources?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. There's so many good books written. It kind of depends on what dimension of the phenomenon you want to look at. If it's UFO history, Richard Dolan, I obviously would recommend following him. He's done so much for the field to establish it. Dr. Gary Nolan on the UAP biological side, UAP Med and Unhidden, and other organizations that are looking at the medical dimensions as well as the psychological dimensions of the phenomenon. The Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, they're doing great work at a research level. Um, you know, there's not going to be a smoking gun, probably, and there's a reason, right? That's the concrete wall. That's the obstructive surface between the public and awareness. It's very interesting to me that something that has operated so pervasively, that has interacted potentially with tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of citizens and government employees, there is almost no physical evidence for it, right? What does that say about the phenomenon? Is it leave no trace, right? Is this a science expedition where they don't want to leave any traces? Or is it leave no evidence, leave no trail, leave no paper trail, right? Cover your tracks. I'm inclined to think it could be either, but there's definitely strong indications it is the latter in part. And getting back to the question about intent, it is tricky. I think it's a decoding effort at this point. The phenomenon is not credibly disclosing itself. Governments are not yet at the position of doing that either. There could be multiple non-human intelligences operating. Each could be not a single species, but an organization of species. We could be seeing multiple multi-species organized groups interacting with humanity in slightly different ways, either for collaborative ends or for competitive ends. And of course, there are indications of possible conflict between NHI, dogfights in the sky. Look in the UFO record; there's records of that. And so there is something of an exopolitical, exosystemic play taking place here on Earth. And here I give kind of the analogy like we're like an island society, right? We think of ourselves it's just us in the vast blue, and whatever's out there beyond the blue is what we imagine to be out there. And whatever comports to our religious beliefs, our wishful thinking, greener pastures. When what we're encountering then is something of a continental reality. These entities, I would estimate, are interacting with us due not only to their own intentions or desires to do so, but because of exosystemic realities and dynamics that are driving this. They're here because of their partners or their competitors or whatever the environment itself conditions in them as a dynamic of engagement with a young species like ourselves. So we're dealing with a continental reality, and it could be complex. But I would say at this point, after 80 years of non-disclosure by both government and the phenomenon, with real indications of physical impacts on people, we need to rule in or rule out: are we dealing with a physical alien visitor? Do they come with a detrimental or hostile form of intent? And are they involving themselves? Are they directly intervening in any way in our human world? Technology, society, religion, etc. If we can rule those out, okay, we can relax and sit back in our chairs. This is not something we need to worry about. If we rule them in based on the evidence, then that predisposes a whole different process for society, and we need to get about figuring out what to do to act upon this much more quickly than we are.
We've touched on this a little bit earlier in the episode with the degradation of the Earth, the war that happens between different groups of humans. But broadly speaking, how do you think non-human intelligence perceives humanity as a species?
Great question. I think, definitely whatever triggered their observation would probably be, the first impression. First impressions might be lasting, right? As the closer they get, they would only see a species ever more warlike, ever more divided, and more destructive to its own environment than they would have seen light years away. So I don't imagine they would see us with a whole lot of respect per se. Um, it kind of comes down to the nature of their interest, right? So if they're here, if they came here out of the events of the 20th century, nuclear conflict, war, environmental deterioration, a sixth mass extinction, all of that. If they came here out of pure concern for us, altruism, then that would say that they do regard us, that they do see our inherent gifts and abilities, and they want to protect that and steward us. Okay, pure altruism. If they came here out of self-concern, then they would be looking at the human threat to them. Are these intelligent hominids going to get off planet with their nuclear weapons and start doing harm beyond their solar system? Now, that I find a little hard to believe that we would ever pose an interstellar threat, but we'll just keep it on the table for a minute. Another possibility is that they are concerned for the planet, either because of its inherent natural value, their interest in it, or because it is inherently valuable to other species. And here we get into kind of the nature-driven, nature-informed way of looking at potential contact, which is if these are evolved entities, then they have probably developed the technologies, the capabilities to compete successfully. That's why they're still alive, right? Of the 4 billion species on Earth, almost none are still alive because they couldn't compete. They didn't adapt and develop those evolutionary traits that allowed them to compete for resources and for living room. So if we're encountering highly advanced entities that have evolved in the universe of limited physical living space and limited physical resources, then we might be engaging with them. They may be engaging with us out of an interest in our planet, its position, its resources, a living space, etc., its biology. There are unique attributes to the planet Earth. We may not think of those as resources, right? They're here. They're probably not here for natural gas, oil, and corn, but they may be here due to the unique geology or biology of the planet. And here we are rapidly destroying that environment, which may be valuable to other species. So, if that's the case, I think they would view us as an unruly and uh, unwelcome apex species that needs to be possibly displaced, or altered in some way, or guided, or stewarded, or some have used the words babysitter, NHI babysitter, or overlord. Right? I don't know quite where it exactly sorts out in that spectrum, but I don't imagine they view us terribly well. I don't think we put off enough signals to garner that regard. And if there's any competitive intent, all the more so, they might want to convince us that we are an infectious disease upon this planet and need to be corralled and contained. And in fact, you do see those narratives.
Yes, you do. We mentioned also that they have not overtly exposed themselves, but they're not necessarily hiding either. You think there's a message in that? Are they trying to communicate something to us through their presence, as shrouded in mystery as it is?
Yeah, I think it's very plausible to say that communication is not just going to be a message, or a document or something like that. It's going to be strategic signaling. So there have been probable efforts to conduct mass display, to show themselves in a controlled manner, possibly either in collaboration or competition with government. I can't imagine a better way to pressure the government than to suddenly throw up a bunch of your craft over cities and cause mass panic or limited mass panic to tell the government, you better not disclose our presence, or you better disclose it in this way, or you better continue to work with us. I mean, in so many ways, they hold the keys in this engagement. They may have been observing us for centuries. They may have our entire species data set, which we have broadcast out into space. We know almost nothing about them in comparison. So they could easily engineer a program of strategic presentation and alteration of perception that favors them and their goals, and whatever those goals are. And so, yeah, they're not purely hidden. They're definitely not making their presence understandable. Even if known, not understandable. People do not understand. And so that to me is a major concern. And I think, there are strong signals that there are hard realities inside the history of this phenomenon. And that is why government has not been able to disclose. There have, by all accounts, been efforts to do so. I don't doubt that some of the movies and TV shows we've seen over the last 30 years have been an effort to tell the public, to flash the little light on the dashboard to say, you should start thinking about this, might come out, right? And we don't want that to destabilize society entirely. So I have strong certainty, in fact, that that has been attempted, and that efforts have been made and squelched to possibly inform the public at various stages. We might be seeing that right now. We're not sure, but I know there are those in government who want to do so.
Right. And I want to get your assessment of the disclosure efforts that have been put forward more recently, particularly with the congressional hearings that we've seen. Those were major. They didn't get the sort of mainstream news coverage that many would have hoped. Especially judging by the things that were said. We mentioned Dave Grush. We're talking about biologics and whatnot. There were a lot of very revealing moments that kind of didn't get circulated publicly as much as you would think that they would. But it is an indication that disclosure is something that is being taken seriously at high levels of government. But is it enough? What do you think? Is there meaningful movement happening?
I think there's a battle at play regarding who wants transparency, more full transparency, who wants controlled transparency for probably a variety of ends, whether that's to maintain control over the UAP tech, to maintain intellectual property, or strategic superiority over adversaries. And then there are those who do not want disclosure of this phenomenon. I think there are multiple factors at play there as well. It's troubling that the human playing field is totally split. We're totally divided over this. I'm not surprised. That's what we do. But the phenomenon is not helping. they're by what I can see in the history and the present of this phenomenon, it is not helping humanity process this and develop a united human response to it. We have a divided human response to it. So I know there are a few good men in the government who are really trying to do the right thing. I don't deride the government or call it all a deep state conspiracy. I think this all or nothing, black or white view is not the one we need of the phenomenon or of the human side. So there are good people in government. I think there are thousands, if not tens of thousands, even in the US government alone, who know about this. And they're trying, some of them. And some of them are really trying to prevent the public from knowing anything. So we're seeing a power play. We're seeing an effort to get the public on board because of what are said to be impending events related to the phenomenon, whether that's a mass reveal, whether that's some kind of strategic or psychological operation that would deceive the public, or whether that's some form of NHI retaliation. All of those have been claimed as driving factors for disclosure needing to happen by set year, set decade. And so, will it be successful? I don't know. What I feel passionate about is society decoding this for themselves. I think there is enough evidence that willing and curious citizens and citizen scientists, citizen researchers can get in the game and help figure this out and also parameterize what the phenomenon is and likely is not. Because as this comes out and rolls into the public, this is the risk of just doom scrolling your social feed. You're going to see concerted efforts to shape your perception of what this event is, who they are, who has worked with them against our human interests, who has worked with them for our human interests, right? It's not going to be a clean slate experience. And so if people are grounded in the history of the phenomenon and the evidence and are using their logic, their reason, their caution, their instinct, and some intuition, I think people can get to a pretty clear picture as to a zone of probable explanations for what this really is. Besides, or looking through all the efforts to misinform the public. I think disclosure is at risk. I think it needs to go international. It needs to get out of the U.S. government. It needs to get out of the U.S. military context, airspace, military, organizations, etc. I think there are other international organizations with information about this that are non-governmental. I think of religious organizations. I have been told that the Vatican has direct information regarding this phenomenon that they have been sitting on. And they will not come forward unless there's enough cover to do so, whether that's covered by governments or by society at large. I also think the pain point has to be reduced for government to disclose by society being willing to know what this is, right? It's not a fairy tale reality. It's not all love and light. It's a difficult, probable interspecies encounter, right? It is the convergence of civilizations. It's the clash of worlds. And it's never easy. It's never clean. And it also doesn't go very well for the less technologically developed society, right? Often they're the society that comes out much the worse for it. So we may be going through some sort of natural event like that. But if society is out to lunch, OTL, right? And they don't want to know. If they do want to know, it's got to be biblical. It's got to be related to ancient history and records and human origins. We've got to connect it to everything, all paranormal phenomena, all conspiracies. If society is totally obfuscating itself, it's hard to imagine human authorities doing all the heavy lifting here.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. If it is a precarious situation in which the less advanced society suffers, a less than glorious fate, then is this a case of ignorance is bliss? The less society knows, the happier they'll be, and they'll just get along with their lives rather than being depressed over the news of what reality actually is? Is that the type of situation that we're dealing with right now?
I think we are in that situation. I don't think we should be in that situation. I think there are some actors that want us in that situation. Fat, dumb, and happy, dominated by our devices, our technology, and whatever is fed to us by the machine. And so that's not what I want for humanity. I think people are strong enough to deal with reality. When I introduce this to people, because I have what I call the UFO conversation all the time with average people everywhere, people are able and willing and desiring to talk about the possibility of life beyond our world. That's what science is already establishing as a probability. Exoplanetary systems, habitable worlds, Earth-like worlds. They want to expand out of this purely human fixated notion of what we are, who we are, and what human purpose should be. So people want it. I think people are ready for it. I just think it has to be framed in the right way. If it's framed as a demonic phenomenon, uh, I don't think that's the right framing, right? If it's framed as something, pure altruism, these beneficial entities that are going to come in our hour of need and save us and give us planet healing technology, I don't think that's the right framing either. I think nature is the right framing. That's the right lens by which to look at this. Now we can look at what happens in nature when species interact, right? There are fundamental dynamics at play in evolutionary biology that should predispose how we look at our encounter with other species of intelligent life forms. That's the ground of thinking I think we need as a society. And with that, we can begin to entertain the possibilities at play. But if we do stay totally ignorant to this and totally preoccupied and obsessed with our human concerns and conflicts, we may wake up one day and not be the humanity that we were, not be the human that you were, right? There could be an effort to alter or to strategically redirect humanity by other highly intelligent, highly strategic forms of life. And we fail to perceive the event taking place. We failed to entertain the possibility we were living in a continental reality with different forces that had been competing and collaborating and figuring out how to make get their ends met for hundreds of thousands of years. And those influences ended up reshaping us, whether that was psychologically, culturally, religiously, or even genetically. And so, that's the risk at play. Do we want to remain the human beings that we are? Is there value in humanity we want to preserve and carry into an interstellar environment? And are there basic premises related to autonomy, free will, access to divinity that we cherish? Because anyone, any other entity at any time could walk into our world that does not value those things and does not care that we value them, and they exert their values upon us. The strong dominate the weak in nature, right? So, in many ways, it's welcome to life. I don't think we need to get a whole lot more exotic than that in how we look at this encounter with NHI.
I don't want to end this conversation on a negative note, but I think this is a question that isn't asked often enough. And people like you and I, in some ways, are fighting for disclosure by having conversations like this. But is there anything that you fear about disclosure happening for humanity?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a number of potentials that are very concerning. The first is that this is disclosed falsely, inaccurately. It's disclosed as either something that is only coming. So, like, we hear about the dates in the 2030s, 2036. We've heard allegations that there is actually an effort within the U.S. military industrial complex to push and parrot a narrative that NHI will come in 2036. So what does that mean? They haven't been here, right? And so is this another psychological operation where they prepare the battle space at the level of information and perception, and then they appear, presumably, and then people swoon to that appearance, right? And they rush to excitedly embrace non-human technologies and belief systems, whatever. So I think narratives like that are a risk. I think certain geopolitical powers disclosing in ways that basically try to aggregate narrative control to themselves or to throw others under the bus, that's a risk. I think an NHI mass reveal at any point is a major risk because as a society, we're totally incapable of discerning the claims of what that reveal would be. They may say that they created us. They may say that they are the angels in the scriptures. They may say that government has been keeping them from disclosing, right? And only now, because of certain political events, are they able to do so. There may be a nuclear altercation, and they stop that from taking place. There seems to be, in the history of ufology, a UAP effort to see if they can figure out how to disable our nuclear warheads from launching, right? So could that be used to as a narrative psychological operation? Well, we're here, we come in peace. We've stopped nuclear war. We've saved thousands of lives already, right? So We're so vulnerable. There are thousands of exploitable points of vulnerability psychologically, culturally, and religiously, that this is part of the preparation we need to do to actually encounter NHI, not even to engage. I don't even think we're ready to engage NHI. People talk about, oh, we need to have a diplomatic solution. We need to have some way to, to talk about diplomacy, to trade access to the world and resources from the world for NHI technology and science. I don't think we're there yet, right? We can't even discern friend from foe. In fact, there may be a fundamental truth here, which is it is so disturbed and convoluted, our perspective and perception of this, that we literally have to mandate the removal of all NHI physically from the earth until such time as we have some governing body and some governing consensus about how to engage. So I don't even think any superpower reverse engineering and NHI technology or proposing some path of diplomacy is really appropriate at this stage. So I worry about those things. I'm also hopeful. I'm not myself afraid of this phenomenon. I'm not afraid of the outcome. I'm actually super excited about what could take place from this, because regardless of the NHI and their intent, this has the power to tell us all that we are way more alike and have much more in common than we ever thought. We are members of a human society, human species. And so this is potentially the missing ingredient that propels the resolution of many long-standing conflicts, that creates a foundation for unity that nothing else literally could. And if we use it for that, tremendous. If we divide over it, if we bicker over NHI technology, that's super tragic. But that's just one dimension. I think individually, this is the activation of a sense of calling. Like this, what bigger issue do you want to be a part of? If this is real, this is it. I mean, this will lay the foundation for the next stage of the human journey, individually and collectively. This is expanding out of this terribly monocular and myopic human perspective on life that has us chasing, possessions and fame and reputation and credibility, but not even a part of a larger movement of where life is heading. So I think there's a healing power to this event of coming in contact with the environment of life. And if we can blow through this concrete wall and give people access to that awareness, that's going to be tremendous. That could resolve so much of what plagues society at literally every level.
I agree wholeheartedly, and I think that's a great note to end on, Reed. It's been a fascinating conversation. Can you let the listeners know where they can learn more about your work?
Yeah, for sure. So I have a podcast called Emergent, where I'm basically analyzing the front lines of humanity's engagement with non-human intelligence at all levels. And so I invite you to Emergent. It's on YouTube and everywhere podcasts play. I also have a new platform called Forerunner, which is for those who want to personally respond on those front lines and get some skin in the game. Start thinking through these probabilities. Start doing some citizen research. Participating in a increasingly large number of citizen-led initiatives that are out there that I'm becoming connected to, and I want others to get connected to. And then last, I'm teaching a course on decoding alien intent, basically just expanding on everything we've talked about and looking at the history of the phenomenon, its key indicators and signals, and using our full human capabilities to assess the nature and intentions of this non-human intelligence. So welcome folks to get in on the free course. And yeah, happy to help people think through what is going on. I'm not trying to tell people what to think, but trying to advise them how to think. And I see a lot of logical fallacies and wishful thinking and the projection of human beliefs onto this non-human phenomenon. And I know if we stay in that mode, we are not going to figure this out. And it or other human actors may figure us out. And I don't want people or society to be played like that. I want people to be empowered and to maintain some control of how they as a human being go through this human experience of making contact with a non-human reality.
It's a very valuable thing, and I can confirm that these are great resources. So I hope that everybody will check it out, and I'll provide links to all of those in the description of this video. So once again, thank you so much, Reed. It's always great to speak to you. For anybody listening, just a reminder that wherever you're listening, if it's on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, please follow the show. It really helps us out. And we'll see you next time.